Hi, I'm Jeff Gordon, and I'm a member of DUC's Stewardship Committee. Anyone who has attended DUC regularly has undoubtedly met Betty Boothe, one of the real pillars of our church. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
So, let's start with where you grew up.
I grew up in Worcester, Massachusetts.
And what was your first experience with the church?
Well, my family were very involved in a Swedish Lutheran church, so that's where I went every Sunday and many times during the week also.
How long have you lived on the Cape?
36 years.
Wow, that's great. Do you recall what actually brought you to this church, to DUC?
Well, my parents retired to the Cape and they lived in the condominiums right across the cemetery, and so we would come down and visit them, and when we visited them here as retirees, we often came to Dennis Union Church. But then they died and Bill retired, and we decided they had the best of both lives because they had the sand and Cape Cod and they had Winnipesaukee and the mountains, and we thought that's a good life. So we made the move 36 years ago.
Did you join DUC like right away?
Well, we didn't because we felt we should look around, even though we knew we'd probably end up here. But we didn't find the fellowship and the friendship anything like what we had here at Dennis Union Church. So yes, we joined Dennis Union Church.
That's great, that's great. So I know you've been a long-time member of the church, and you probably volunteered to serve this church in every possible way imaginable. There's probably too many things to talk about under this venue, but what are some of the more rewarding things you've done, considering all you've done for this church?
Well, I was a part of the group that went to Honduras on a mission group, and that was a very fulfilling experience. And I also went with a group that was sponsored by the church to Oberammergau, which was a wonderful experience also. But then I think my most thrilling experience is the singing in the choir, especially when we did the big cantatas and the very classical pieces of music.
My wife Elise told me to mention that she looks at you as the hostess with the mostest, because you seem to know about everything that's gone on in the church and where everything is, where things are kept, that if anybody has a question about anything historical or not, ask Betty Boothe, she'll know.
That's 36 years of being here.
That's true, but it's still a great thing. Are there any other things, maybe outside what you've done on committees and in the choir and the bell choir, that really sparks a memory, that things that have happened at this church since you've been a member that you really think about and go, wow?
Well, I think my husband was involved in the building committee when we picked up the sanctuary and moved it towards 6A, and because he was so involved, I was. And that was exciting just to see what could happen. And when you think of these pews in the front rows here, they're new, but they look old because the membership of the church wanted the church to keep that look. And I think they succeeded.
I do too. I had no idea until you just mentioned it, that this church was actually physically moved.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, I took pictures all along nearly every day, and I've got a little album that sometimes is fun to share with new members because they just have no idea that part is all new.
Yeah.
And it's made for many deeper religious experiences because we've got the room in which to do it now.
That's a great story. I'm so glad I was able to hear it. And one of these days I'd love to see that album, the photos. Okay, so now the last couple of questions are not meant to put you on the spot or anything. But can you tell me what's your favorite thing or things about DUC? I know you've done so much, so it's not easy. But if you had one or two things you haven't mentioned yet.
I think the church services. Why do we come to church? We come to worship God. And I think the Sunday services are very important. And I think Nancy has done a wonderful job, as our previous ministers did. But to me, that's the important part of Dennis Union Church.
That's a nice. Last question. If you could inspire other people who come to this church to get more involved, what would you have them do?
First of all, I think I'd look at their backgrounds to see what their skills are and use those skills and make them feel comfortable in what they were good at in their lives. But I also think anything that working with people, whether it's ushering or greeting or just attending dinners, coffee hours, getting to know the wonderful people in this church, because it's the people of this church that keep it going and keep it going with such excitement, which is important.
I agree. That's what clinched it for Elise and I. We came to this church, we're wonderfully treated by so many people on our first day that we literally stopped looking at other churches, and by the time we got home, we had already decided to join. So that's great.
So I think new people, if they could get involved in what they're good at, but also attend fun things and realize that we have a good time too.
That's great. Well, I appreciate your time, Betty. This was fun for me, and I think a lot of people will be, happy to see this and will enjoy having heard from you. So thanks again.
Okay. Well, thank you for asking me.
You're welcome.